Good morning, North America. Good afternoon, Europe. And good evening to everyone joining us from India. This is US Election Watch. I'm Alistair D'Souza in Washington, D.C. The headlines. Harris gears up for her first interview on Fox News. Trump says it's not worthwhile doing interviews on Fox. A judge in Georgia blocks a rule that calls for hand counting of ballots. The judge says the rule comes too late. Elon Musk becomes a mega donor in the Trump campaign. Musk has donated $75 million to a PAC he created to campaign for Trump. And Michelle Obama gets ready to hit the campaign trail for Harris. Michelle Obama to headline a rally in Atlanta a week before Election Day. According to a new Reuters Ipsos poll, Democratic vice presidential candidate and vice president, of course, there, Kamala Harris holds a marginal 3% point lead over Republican Donald Trump. Now, 45% for Harris versus 42% for Trump. More recently, Harris appears to be getting a boost from voters, picking her as the better candidate for healthcare and for handling political extremism. Now, voters also rate the U.S. economy as the top issue in the election and say Trump was the better economic steward. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris has agreed to do her first ever formal interview with Fox News this evening. The interview will take place near Philadelphia shortly before it airs at 6 p.m. Eastern. Harris is expected to be interviewed for about 25 to 30 minutes. Harris has appeared across a range of traditional and niche media outlets in recent weeks, but this one is different because it's on Fox News, seen as generally unfriendly towards Harris. Now, Trump has accused Harris of election desperation as she intensifies her media engagement just weeks before the presidential election. Let's get you now more on this story. We're joined by NDTV correspondent Natasha Israni in New York. Natasha, give us more on this interview. Anything on who will be doing this? Also, what's behind the thinking for Harris to appear on a right-wing media outlet?
Wonderful to join you, Alistair, and Brett Baer, who's the chief political anchor of Fox News and is a major host. He's been with the network for 27 years, is going to be doing the interview. Now, he is seen as less partisan than some of the other anchors that we see on Fox News. He's seen as someone who's more balanced in his approach, and that balanced in approach obviously also gets him a lot of criticism from the pro-Trump campaign and the pro-Trump supporters who think he may be too soft. So already there's criticism on social media, even before the interview has happened, that he may not come out as strongly on some questions to Kamala Harris. But he has gone on the record on various podcasts as well as his own social media accounts saying that he is going to have a very balanced and fair approach, and he is going to try and get answers to questions that he thinks American voters want to hear better answers on. This is likely to include immigration. It's definitely going to include the economy as well. And yes, it is a big win for him, just as much as Kamala Harris, who is trying to say that she is not afraid of going into so-called enemy territory, which is seen as Fox News. So this interview is going to be the must watch, and as you said earlier, it's going to be broadcast as live, which means it is recorded about half an hour before it is telecast, but 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is the beginning of the show, is when it's going to be broadcast.
Natasha, Trump not happy about Harris's Fox interview. We're hearing, what's he saying?
Yes, he is certainly not happy. Now, he is a very smart politician, as is well known about Trump. He's very good at turning any narrative to his advantage. And he likes to be seen as the outsider and as a revolutionary, even though he's actually been an insider as a president for 4 years. And what he's saying now is that even Fox News, which was supposed to be friendly ground for him, is turning against him, and that Fox News is making a grave error by having Kamala Harris on, and that the interview will not be fair and balanced. That's what he's talked about on his own social media website. So he is really laying the groundwork, saying that this interview is just a plug, and he's also painting it as Kamala Harris being desperate in the last few weeks leading to the elections on November 6th.
Natasha Esrani in New York joining us here on NDTV. Good to see you here on our show, US Election Watch. Now, in other news, voters in Georgia have turned out in record numbers as the battleground state opened for early voting in the presidential election. At least 252,000 voters have cast ballots at early voting sites, nearly double in the first day of early voting seen in the 2020 election. Early voting, either in person or by mail, has become increasingly popular with US voters. Reaction from Trump on the early voting: he said the votes are coming in at a nice level for his Republican Party. Now, another big story out of Georgia: a judge has temporarily halted a new rule that would have required poll workers to hand count ballots in the upcoming November 5th election. The decision is a setback for Donald Trump and his allies, who pushed for the rule following Trump's 2020 defeat in the state. Democrats argued the change could cause confusion and delay results.
The Republican camp has suffered a double whammy in the crucial swing state of Georgia. The state's Superior Court judge, Robert McBurney, has blocked a recently passed rule that required hand counting of ballots on election night. Interestingly, the setback came hours after the same judge delivered another body blow, mandating that local election officials must certify results in the swing state. Refuting the Georgia Election Board's attorney argument that hand count would only take a few extra minutes rather than hours to complete, the recent head count rule was termed as being too much, too late. And not to anyone's surprise, the Blue Camp has welcomed the ruling. The contentious new rule was passed as recently as September 20th by the pro-Trump conservative majority of Georgia's election board, due to be implemented late October. It directed every county to have 3 poll workers count the paper ballots, but not votes, on election night after the polls close and before a machine count. Speaking of mandating local election officials to certify results, Justice McBurney opined that voters would be silenced if officials refused to certify election results. The ruling cuts at the heart of a key argument made by right-wing activists since the 2020 election, when Donald Trump allegedly sought to disrupt the certification process as part of his alleged bid to subvert the results. He still faces criminal charges accusing him of pressuring Georgia officials to reverse his 2020 election loss, though he denies any wrongdoing. Trump has pleaded not guilty. Early voting began in record numbers in the crucial swing state on Tuesday. Along with the other 6 swing states, Georgia is expected to determine who ends up winning the race to the White House. Arjun Samar Mahindran for NDTV World.
Let's get you more on the story. We are joined by Sonji Kumar. She is with a group called South Asians for Harris. Also, Amy Tarkanian. She is a Republican strategist. She is also former Nevada Republican state chairwoman. Amy, let me come to you first. How much of a blow is this for Republicans? Do you agree with Judge Robert McBurney that this whole idea about it being too much to be implemented so close to election day, that's also what people on the ground have been saying?
Sure. Well, I actually agree with this ruling because poll workers, they're volunteers and they do take time out of their busy schedules to learn the rules that are going to be implemented in the current election system. So if they want to make those changes, then like you do in Nevada, you would have to have it go through your state legislature and then they can be implemented in the following election. So this truly was a last minute scenario that would delay the election process and in the certification. Is it a good idea? Sure, because I'm sure it'll calm a number of folks who do believe that there are problems in the election system and still truly believe that the last election was stolen, which I disagree with, but there are people who have problems with it. So if it calms people down, great, but you're going to have to go through the legal process and make sure it's done timely.
As a Republican strategist, though, how do you think this would play out? Do you think this is really bad for the Trump camp?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily bad because I think the elections are fair and balanced. And so I think they're still going to have the correct outcome despite having this hand count or not. And, this hand count was simply just to make sure that it was the number of votes cast that aligned with what the machines showed at the end. It wasn't going to show how many votes were cast for Trump, how many votes were cast for Harris. And so, it is timely. It's something that does take up some time. And so I think in the end, they're still going to have the right outcome.
Okay, Sonji, you have a Republican strategist there agreeing with what the judge ruled. Now, Democrats have been against this whole idea of hand counting, saying it could lead to fraud. But important, as Amy just mentioned, that the election officials were merely counting the number of ballots to match those tallied by the machine. They weren't really reading the ballots to see, how people voted, as we heard from Amy just now. So what's the issue? It's in my view, or in many other people's view perhaps, is that it's just reassuring voters that the machine got it right.
So the rule itself is not what was being challenged. It was the timing of it and the reason behind it, and the fact that it was being implemented just literally days before the election date and actually after early voting has begun. And I empathize with Amy because she is part of a party that is still trying to balance Trump versus rationality. I mean, everyone knows the election wasn't stolen. They know President Biden won. But a lot of these rules that are being pushed by the state election board, which there's still 3 or 4 more out there that are being challenged based on rationality and reasonable basis. And that is the basis on which the judge ruled against the rule going into effect. It's not the fact of the rule, it's how it's being pushed down the throats of 7,500 poll workers who are already trained and county election boards that already have their processes in place. That's the problem. He will look at the rule in a reasonable manner, not based on some last minute, trying to, instill chaos, as I said last week, into the Georgia election process.
Yeah. You did mention that when we had you on Friday. Now, Amy, the judge also made reference to January 6th, the attack on the U.S. Capitol. He said that those memories haven't faded away. Just on Tuesday, Trump was in Georgia telling his supporters to deliver a victory that's, quote, too big to rig. Clearly a reference to his misinformation that the 2020 election was stolen. Do you worry about a repeat of the same scenario this time around in 2024?
I do to some degree, and you use the word misinformation when this is clearly disinformation. Misinformation is accidental. Disinformation is intentional. And he knows that over and over and over again in the court of law, it was turned down and he lost in every case to show that there was systemic fraud, and it just wasn't that wasn't the case. And so he continues to push and peddle that message, and it trickles down to his followers that believe every word that he says, unfortunately, which leads to chaos, confusion. People don't trust the voting and election process, which I think is very dangerous. And he sets himself up for a possible failure, but still to be viewed as the winner, in the outcome, no matter what. And I think that's actually very dangerous. And I think that it actually hurts the Republican Party overall, because the down ticket, we actually have some really excellent candidates, and they're having to, as your panelists mentioned, walk a fine line between reality and irrationality, and wanting to make sure that they're trying to get their message out to their constituents on how they're going to better their lives, while still having to walk this tightrope with a man who's pushing disinformation.
All right, Sonji, you're a lawyer. What happens next with this case, do you think? An appeal? Where can this go? Any chance of the rule coming back into play and we end up actually seeing hand counting of ballots in Georgia after all?
Yeah, I think, I'm not involved in the legal process, but it can be appealed in Georgia.
Sure.
A case goes from Fulton County Superior Court, would then go to the appellate court, and then ultimately the Supreme Court of Georgia. It could also, I guess, somebody could try to move it to federal court. There's different strategies. We really hope this is the end of it. We are very close to Election Day, as you already covered in the news. 328,000 something Georgians have already voted. This is, the first day of voting yesterday. This is not the time to start messing with the rules of the election or the counting process. It can be dealt with after the elections, and if it's a reasonable rule, it can go into effect. I want to mention that the Republican Secretary of State and Attorney General oppose this rule. It's just a handful of Trump supporters on the state election board that are pushing it. So we hope that it doesn't get appealed, but of course it could be appealed. And there are still a few more days till the election, so anything can happen.
Sonji and Amy, thank you so much for your time here on US Election Watch on NDTV. In other news now, California is solidly liberal. It's almost certain that Trump is set to lose in California. However, November 5th will also see Americans voting for their local representative who will play a role in national politics, meaning seats are up for grabs in the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, in 2022, in the midterm elections, Republicans took 4 seats in California. It was pivotal. That helped in seeing the House flip from Democratic control to Republicans. Now, one Indian American wants to make sure that the House firmly stays in Republican control. Vinay Kurtiventi is a Republican congressional candidate from California. He is hoping to win in a district that encompasses portions of Alameda County, which is part of the greater San Francisco Bay Area. Vinay was born in Hyderabad and earned a bachelor's degree from Osmania University in 1996. Thanks, Vinay, for your time here this morning on US Election Watch. Vinay, you have a real uphill battle when it comes to winning a heavily Democratic base in your district. Why did you decide to take on this fight?
Alistair, thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I came here looking for the American dream. Like a lot of people, I found it, but I feel slowly it's slipping away. And like a lot of people, I was tired of being tired. We came here searching for the American dream, to have a good life for ourselves, our families. To put it in the context of India, if India is the Janma Bhoomi, this is the Karma Bhoomi for us. And this is home. And home is always worth fighting for.
Okay.
When you see that, when you expect the law to work a certain way, and when it's not working, it's our duty to go back and then do the right thing. That's why I'm running for Congress.
All right. Now, Vinay, you've said that you've come to the US, you actually came to the US with nothing, and you've, of course, built a successful business in tech. How is Trump really good for business? Because he's talking about slapping tariffs of 20% on goods from other countries. It gets worse, 60% on all imports from China. How will any business that relies on competitive price products from, say, places like India survive? How do these tariffs really even make sense?
I would say, like, there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation being spread on tariffs, right? So, for example, if you take US cars, when we export them to Europe, they slap 100% tariff on it. Local consumption and local production actually improves local economy. And especially like small businesses, they would be able to like really scale higher and then be able to cater to local economy better than the tariffs. So
But many of the
the
economists say that this will actually hurt small businesses.
certain sections or certain industries where there is like this raw material imported from countries like China, they might see some challenges until the supply chain improves. But certain industries definitely are going to really benefit from this.
Okay, you say you have been inspired by your grandfather, a former freedom fighter who worked besides Mahatma Gandhi. Trump, many may argue, does not come across as standing for those Gandhian principles. You also say you have an instinct to uncover the truth. Now, how do you reconcile these things when you hear from your leader, Donald Trump? We hear the lies, the falsehoods, falsehoods such as immigrants eating pets in Springfield, or claims that migrants are murderers. So, how do you really reconcile those things when you are representing him and that party?
So, the mainstream media here in the US is one sided and biased. There are multiple videos that are out there. There have been instances where we've seen migrant crime. Recently, it was today, just before I drove down here. There was a report in New York that 42% of all crimes in Manhattan is committed by illegal immigrants. So if you really follow the news, there is no disinformation. It's straightforward. When you allow unvetted people in the country, the crime is going to rise. They've let in a lot of people on the FBI's most wanted watch list into the country. And this is really, really bad for the country. And I really hope Trump keeps his promise of shutting it down and mass deportations on day one.
So, you agree with the mass deportations?
I do. I do. I do agree with mass deportations. I, in fact, feel that there's got to be a legal immigration reform in this country. A lot of like Indians or highly skilled workers come here, but they've been like stuck in backlog for a long time. So according to Trump's latest plan.
Yes, and just before I let you go, I want to talk about that legal immigration process or legal right to work here in the US. Reports say that ordinary workers in Silicon Valley, for example, many of them are Indians. They come here on H-1B visas. As you know, there's a long wait time. Many of them can't stay if they're fired or have to go back to their home country. Spouses can't work. If you are in office in US Congress, what are the changes that you'd like to see on this front?
So people on both sides, both Democratic and Republicans, never actually worked on this topic. So what I would do is be a champion for immigration reform and make sure that everyone stuck in the backlog is really taken care of. You would rather want to see highly skilled workers who can like really cater to the economy and bring the country up than like just open the border and let everyone come in, right? So this is one of the top things on my agenda. I'm going to lobby
Vinay.
hard in a bipartisan way to get it done.
Okay. Vinay, thanks very much for joining us here on US Election Watch. Vinay there, a Republican candidate from California, hoping to win in the US Congress. Now, Tesla CEO and ex-owner Elon Musk has given around $75 million to a political action committee he created to campaign for Donald Trump. The money was given for a period of 3 months. Musk's donations to America PAC propel him into the exclusive club of Republican mega donors. That's a list that also includes banking heir Timothy Mellon and casino billionaire Miriam Adelson. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is positioning himself as a key figure Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as we mentioned, is positioning himself as a key figure in shaping American agricultural policy. If Donald Trump wins the presidency, Kennedy, known for his anti-vaccine activism and environmental efforts, initially ran for president as an independent before throwing his support behind Trump. Recently, Kennedy posted a video outside the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, hinting at his potential role in a second Trump administration. Trump himself praised Kennedy's ideas during a rally in Pennsylvania, saying, "We will make America healthy again, and RFK Jr. is the one to do it." Now, that's it for US Election Watch. I'm Alistair D'Souza in Washington, D.C.